Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming out for the President's Dream Colloquium on Women in Technology for this fall. My name is Leslie Shen, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Engineering Science and this Dream Colloquium's chair. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Coquitlam, and Musqueam First Nations people. And I now have the honor of introducing our President and Vice Chancellor for Simon Fraser University, Andrew Petter.
Thank you, Leslie. And if I sound a little gruff, it's because I got a cold, so I apologize for that. I'll try not to breathe at anyone. It's great to be here at almost the start, because I know you started yesterday, of another President's Dream Colloquium, and this one in particular. It's really an exciting opportunity to connect with the university community on topics that are incredibly important to us, and to allow us to come together as a community, to give students a chance to learn, and to really explore topics in depth that deserve that kind of attention. And this Dream Colloquium on Women in Technology, Attracting, Retaining, and Promoting Diverse Talent certainly qualifies as such a topic. Now, the reason it's called the President's Dream Colloquium isn't just that I kind of dreamed up the idea of it. I actually stole it, as I admitted earlier, from a couple of other institutions. But it's because I wanted to give a chance to the university community to dream about opportunities to bring great speakers. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had great speakers and students could actually take a course in association with those speakers, speaking on a topic that would be of broad interest to at least 3 different disciplines across the university. And in this case, I think you've got many more than 3 disciplines across the university. And so what the colloquium does is it combines these public lectures with classes in which the students have a chance to read the materials of the speakers and then meet with the speakers, and then do their own research and their own exploration on the topics. It gives the university community a wonderful chance to hear from great speakers and to explore these themes, and it gives the faculty members and others involved the chance to connect across disciplines, and hopefully through that to extend their own research interests and teaching interests. Now, I understand this semester you've got 12 students in the course, and they're coming right across the university from different disciplines. And students in the past have told me that they love the course because they say it's sort of like a field course without having to leave the university. And because it's interdisciplinary. Students learn from each other because you bring different disciplinary perspectives to bear on a common theme, and learn a lot more because of what you bring to the table and the knowledge that you share in the process. It also is a program that really reflects the vision of the university. As I think everyone in this room must know, our vision is to be an engaged university. And as much as that engagement is about us engaging with the community, it's also about us engaging with each other and bringing the research and teaching exercise and enterprise together, and having the university community engage. And so the colloquium seemed to provide a really good forum in which we could engage as a community on issues such as this. So I'm really, really pleased that this colloquium has come together. I'm particularly pleased that it's going to bring together thought leaders, faculty, students, and guests to explore the theme of women in technology. As a university that is deeply committed to promoting equity and diversity, I am keenly interested in finding ways, as I know you are, to encourage greater representation of women in technological disciplines. And I'm very proud of the fact that as a university we have many women in leadership positions, extraordinary women in leadership positions, including many of those who've organized this colloquium. I must say it's an incredible organizing committee that Leslie's put together. But we have much more to do, and I know we particularly have a lot more to do in tech disciplines. So if this colloquium provides an opportunity for us to better understand some of the cultural and other barriers that exist that we can start to break down here at SFU, to encourage more women to come into tech disciplines and to encourage greater representation, it will have made a further contribution to the university and to our future, and to the mission that Leslie has in her chair position, and to the commitment we have as a university to equity and diversity. So I see it as a great university colloquium as well from that perspective. Now, you're going to hear from a great speaker today. You'll also have a chance to ask some questions and share some ideas afterwards. I'm going to apologize. I have to sneak out because I have to be on a plane to Australia in a few hours, but I will listen to the speaker. I will miss your excellent questions and ideas, but I'll pick them up on the webcast perhaps. Of course, none of this colloquium would have been possible without some faculty getting together and proposing it. It's come out of the minds of some great people who thought it would be a good idea, and we are privileged to benefit from their effort. And they are our colloquium chair, Dr. Leslie Shannon from Engineering Science, and of course Leslie also is the NSERG chair for Women in Science and Engineering for the BC Yukon region. Dr. Carolyn Sperry from the School of Mechatronic Systems Engineering. Dr. Natalie Sinclair from the Faculty of Education and also Research Chair in Tangible Mathematics. Dr. Jennifer Marchbank from the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. Anne Laverne from the School of Computing Science. Dr. Stephen Wright, you let one guy in, from the Department of Psychology, and Dr. Sarah Lubick from the Beatty School of Business, who's also SFU Director of Entrepreneurship. Dr. Karen Kavanaugh from the Department of Physics, and Dr. Lynn Bartram from the School of Interactive Art and Technology and School of Computing Science. What a brains trust. And add to that the brains trust that we're going to benefit from in terms of the speakers that you're bringing here. I also want to acknowledge the Dean of Graduate Studies office because they do all the organizing. And I particularly want to acknowledge Danielle Livengood, Gladys Wee, and of course the Graduate Studies Dean Pro Tem Jeff Dirksen, who have helped to sponsor and organize the colloquium. And I am really, really pleased that I can be here when we're able to honor someone I've heard so much about and been looking forward to hear from, Dr. Maria Clave, who will be speaking on broadening participation in computing, not copyright, broadening participation in computing. And I know you're very much looking forward to hearing from her, so I'm going to get off the stage and I'm going to let Leslie get back on and make a proper introduction. So thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the President's Dream Colloquium.
So this, President Petter obviously has a great deal of passion for this colloquium, and I can tell you that after this experience of working with this team, and as you can tell, it was quite a large team, it was really amazing. The way we were able to grow this. And as the NSERC Chair for Women in Science and Engineering for the BC Yukon region, it's not a lovely acronym, so we go by West Coast Women in Engineering, Science, and Technology. West, it's easy to say, easy to write on a business card. The other one, not so much. But really our mission is to engage industry, the community, and students to increase awareness and participation of women and other underrepresented groups in the STEM fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, both for studies and careers. And this chair program really inspired this colloquium because the things we're really focusing on within my chair program is really that pipeline of K-12 to try and increase the number of students coming into these programs in our university, but also leadership roles for women. And there was such an interesting conversation to be had with for example, I actually collaborate with Steve Wright, so I didn't just kind of let him in. He's on a joint shirt grant with me. So these conversations are so much more valuable in the broader discussion, and I'm so lucky that everyone was willing to participate. I also now want to take a chance to say that we're hoping that this community will help with improving diversity in hiring, retention, and promotion, as well as promotion to those leadership roles, breaking down those barriers, getting rid of the leaks in the pipeline. And with that, I'd love to introduce Dr. Maria Clave. Professionally, she's currently the president of Harvey Mudd College. When she arrived, only about 30% of students and faculty were women. Today, about 45% of students and over 40% of faculty are women. They've recently graduated classes in computing science, engineering, and physics that are majority women. So this is an institution we can learn from. She's a computer scientist with a PhD in mathematics from the University of Alberta. She spent 15 years at UBC, including as the Dean of Science and as the first BC Yukon NSERC Chair for Women in Science and Engineering from 1997 to 2003. So she's version 1.0 and I'm version 4.0. On a more personal level, Maria Clave is a fantastic mentor and advocate and friend, and we are so very lucky to have her here today to engage us in this conversation. So Maria, thank you so much.
So I'm thrilled to be here, and I can tell you that When I was in the last year of my PhD in mathematics, I spent that last year at the University of British Columbia. And my dream job was to get a job at SFU. And they were actually advertising a tenure track position in mathematics. And I thought, oh yes, me. Well, needless to say, they didn't give it to me. They gave it to somebody who's actually a long-term friend of mine, Pavel Hell, who was a fantastic person to hire. But it is very nice being here, and I was giving a talk yesterday in Seattle for the Cascadia Innovation Corridor. One of the things I said was, the first time I visited this region was a visit to Vancouver when I was 13 years old. I was a trumpet player in a concert band in Edmonton, Alberta, and we were doing a series of concerts, and I was so impressed by Vancouver that I said, when I'm a grown-up and can choose where I live, I'm moving to Vancouver. And, you know, it took 24 years before I actually managed to move to Vancouver. But when we moved to Vancouver, our children were 3 and 6. And one of the things I learned that somebody should have told me beforehand is that if you move to Vancouver with children, you don't leave until your youngest has graduated from high school. Because Vancouver, and by that I mean the Lower Mainland region, is just a fantastic place to raise children. And so we were here and loved the time we were here. And I had breakfast with President Ono yesterday morning. It was my first meeting with him. And he said, "Do you miss Vancouver?" And I said, "I couldn't even visit Vancouver for the first 10 years without bursting into tears. It's been 15 years, I don't cry every time I come." So these photographs are actually first-year students who are now in their 3rd year, and they're chosen to represent the diversity of our college. So I'm going to tell you about some of the things that have happened at Harvey Mudd College as we try to attract a more diverse group of students and help them succeed in science and engineering. So I'll tell you the diversity and inclusion journey at Harvey Mudd. And I will tell you, this is not always a happy story. Last semester at Harvey Mudd was the worst semester of my academic career. And I might say a little bit about that. I'll tell you how we made the CS and engineering majors accessible and engaging. How we managed to make computers something that every single major actually wanted. I do a fair amount of speaking in technology companies, but everything from startups to places like Microsoft and Intel and Google, Facebook, et cetera. And so I have some thoughts on how to change the culture in companies large and small. And then we're going to have an opportunity for discussion at the end. And this is, so every year I do a holiday card that's a painting. So I'm a very serious painter, and Eugene was complaining because I wasn't actually drawing when I was in his office today. And I do paint whenever I'm in a meeting that's going to last 2 hours or longer. And so one year I decided to do a painting of our faculty members. And so I took a whole bunch of pictures of them, and then I cut them out and arranged them, and then I did the painting based on this one. So that's not the painting, it's actually pictures. So, Harvey Mudd College. Okay, be honest, raise your hand if you had never heard of Harvey Mudd College before you saw this talk being advertised. Yeah, neither had I. And so after we left UBC and went to Princeton, one of the things I discovered was that if you are a senior academic leader and you're female, and particularly if you're in science or engineering, you will get a request every week, sometimes 2 or 3, to be a candidate for a provost or a president somewhere. Now, it has nothing to do with who you are personally. It's because they want more women on their pool, and they think that somebody who's at Princeton, wow, they must be really great. And so I had developed a little answer, a cheat sheet for what I would say. And I would always say something like, well, I'm really honored that you would consider me as a candidate, but I'm being at Princeton for a relatively short period of time, and I intend to stay here for several more years, so I'm really not interested in being a candidate. And I was really good at that, and it was true. And then this crazy place called Harvey Mudd, after I'd been there for 2.5 years, reached out to me. And they sent a brochure describing what they were looking for in the president. And only because I had heard of Harvey Mudd, and the reason I'd heard of it was because Harvey Mudd won the inaugural prize that the American Mathematical Society gave out for an exemplary mathematics department. And I knew they were really innovative in mathematics education. And I happen to really love mathematics education. I love it at the graduate level, I love it at K through 12, I love it at preschool, I love it at the undergraduate level. And so I opened the brochure, which was, well, I guess I can say now it was a really good thing I did it at the time. I read it, and it sounded like the person they were looking for was me. And so I gave it to my husband to read. Now, I am married to a saint. His name is Saint Nicholas. Now, initially, my parents labeled him a saint because you'd have to be a saint to be married to Maria. Eventually, everyone labeled him a saint because he's incredibly supportive. And he reads this thing, he says, yeah, it sounds just like you. We are not moving. And he goes, so my husband had a CRC. He's a very well-known theoretical computer scientist. He's an amazing person. And what he said is, every time we move, you move to the new position, and I have to pack up the boxes and move the family to follow you. And I lose an entire year of my research career. I said, you're right. And then I said, but you know that my next job after this one is I'm going to be a president. And you also know that we would really much prefer to be on the West Coast. So let's count all of the institutions I might be interested in being president of on the West Coast. And we came out with maybe 7. And I go, and Nick, you know that when they choose a president, no offense, Andrew, it's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot because the reality is they will have several excellent candidates. And the decision of who they pick really will have more to do about what's going on in the institution at the time than who you are and what you might bring. Because it's really, they're looking for the person who can lead them through the next however many years. And so he says, okay. And yes, Harvey Mudd College is in California, it's on the West Coast. He says, okay, send them your resume and tell them that you're not a serious candidate, which was exactly what I did. So, and I kept on trying to drop out of the search over and over again. I said, I don't want to leave Princeton, I'm not coming, I'm not serious. And I kept on saying, now, just in case somebody says this to you, you need to know this is a trick. I kept on saying, well, we know you're not serious, but we just want you to continue in the pool a little bit longer, just because we like to compare other serious candidates to you. I just fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. So anyhow, well, of course, we did eventually end up going. In the end, once Nick had actually visited Harvey Mudd, he wanted to go even more than I did. It was one of the best choices I've made in my life. It's been just an amazing experience. And when I think about the wonderful opportunities I've had in positions, my 2 favorite jobs are being head of the computer science department at the University of British Columbia and being president of Harvey Mudd. So let me tell you about Mudd. First of all, we are tiny. We have 825 students right now. We've grown a little bit, so we're now more like 99 faculty instead of 90, and we have 7 academic departments. Now, Harvey Mudd is one of the 5 undergraduate Clermont colleges, and each of the colleges has a particular flavor. So there's Pomona, which is richer than God. Like their endowment per student is like 7 times ours. It's, you know, it was started about the same time as Stanford. It's a very traditional liberal arts college. It is, you know, always ranked in, you know, somewhere between number 3 and number 6 among liberal arts colleges in the United States. Then there's Clermont. Then there's Scripps College, which is a women's college. So think feminist. You know, the criticism that presidents at Scripps get is, you're a middle of the road feminist. You know, that's really not doing it, right? The third one that was founded was Clermont Mckenna College, which was founded as veterans were returning, after veterans were returning from World War II. And its sort of theme is pre-law, pre-business. So politically much more right-wing than the other colleges. We are the fourth one. We're the Science and Engineering College. And we were founded to educate engineers, scientists, and mathematicians who would become well-versed in all of these disciplines, as well as humanities, social sciences, and the arts, so that they would be prepared to assume leadership roles in their fields with a clear understanding of the impact of their work on society. And the background for this was the development of the atomic weapons. The founding president was one of the few physicists who chose not to be part of the Manhattan Project because he thought atomic weapons would be bad for society. And so we, in terms of the quality of our students, think of the very best students that you have in math, science, and engineering here at Simon Fraser. I basically say they're like the top honors students at a Canadian university. Now, that's actually important because, number one, they're humble. Number two, they're collaborative. Number three, they're very hardworking. Number four, they're very creative. Number five, they're incredibly curious. But I want to go back to the first one. They're humble. And this is not what Caltech and MIT are like, but we compete with them and Stanford for our students. I've already told you about a little bit about our values. We have an honor code. So you literally could leave your laptop in the dining commons for a month and it would still be there. This is a slight problem because people do leave their skateboards and bikes and other things unlocked, and we have cities near us that think of the Clermont colleges as a treasure trove. They love challenge. We say all the time, it's every student's responsibility to help every other student succeed, and we really mean it. We work very hard, and as I said, we have a lot of humility. The faculty who choose to come to Harvey Mudd, they come because they want to be at a place that values teaching as much or more than research, and they care more about the education of our students than their own careers. I mean, it's just something I've never really, I've seen individual faculty members at Canadian universities who bring that sort of commitment to their work, and it's true for our staffs as well. So we're an unusual place. Sometimes I say, I'm not religious, but I say, going to work at Harvey Mudd is like going to church every day because you have a community that is very aligned. Okay. It was founded in 1955, and the trustees wanted it to be a men's college. Joe Platt, the founding president, wanted it to be co-ed. And in an discussion before they decided which it would be, one of the trustees said to Joe, well, who would ever want to marry a female mathematician? And Joe said, I did. And it was true, he did. And as a female mathematician, I take this pretty seriously. But, you know, we really, for the first 16 years of our existence, there was a cap on the percentage of students who could be female. It was 11%. I mean, why would you pick that number? I have no idea. But, you know, this is a photograph from the early days, and we really were very largely white and male. And one of the things that happens when you have been when you've had a long existence being largely, you know, one race and one gender, there are a lot of things in how you do things that are just habit that you're not even aware of that make it much less supportive for people who are not that gender and that race. So 20 years ago, or 20 years before I arrived, so I arrived in 2006, we're about 20% female in the faculty, which is actually really high for a science and engineering school. I mean, I'm not sure MIT has hit 20% yet. Caltech only quite recently got into the double digits percentage of women on their faculty, and we're about the same percentage for female students. When I arrived, we were about 30% in each one. And by 2016, we were about 40% female and close to 50%. I think we're probably 48% at that time. Our incoming class this year is 52% female, so we're probably a little bit closer to that 50-50 ratio. But last year, which was the figure that Leslie had, our incoming class was 45% female. We're such a small place that a few students, one way or another, make a difference in the percentages. So we typically, this year we admitted 225 students. Last year it was more like 218. Female faculty leadership. So I'm the first female president after 50 years. And I was the first female head of a science department at UBC, the first female vice president, the first female dean of science, the first female dean of engineering at Princeton. So I have been the first female in my job for roughly 30 years. In our first 50 years, we had 2 instances where there was a department chair who was female. We have 7 academic departments. So that's not very many women who have chaired a department. Last year, sorry, these slides are from last year, 6 of our 7 department chairs were female. This year it's only 5, and that's because one of them became the first female dean of the faculty, which is our equivalent to the provost, the vice president academic. Now, a lot of the things I will be putting up here are on purpose in the sense that we deliberately have worked hard to increase the percentage of female students and female faculty. That bit about the department chairs, that wasn't on purpose. It happened, and I think part of the reason it happened because we had done so much programming on diversity and inclusion, on training our faculty search committees how to recruit a diverse pool of candidates, that when it came to the department chair process, given that we had women in the department who had reached that level of seniority, it just sort of happened. And it's pretty cool. Right now, the 5 of the 7 department chairs that are female, every single one of us is the first woman to chair their department. And the departments they're chairing are biology, computer science, chemistry, engineering, and physics. Yes. Okay. Now, sometimes Harvey Mudd gets dinged with, well, you only care about white women. You didn't work on people of color. Now, it's actually not true that Harvey Mudd had been trying to recruit more African American and Hispanic students 10 years before I got there. And we were working really hard in my first 6 years there to recruit more African American and Hispanic students. And just to sort of give you some numbers, roughly 13% of the US population is African American, and right now about 15% is Hispanic. In the state of California, in Los Angeles County, which is where Harvey Mudd College is situated, 70% of the city is Hispanic. In California, it's, I believe, about 40% of the population. And all I can say is we tried lots of different things, and it didn't seem to make any difference. And then, all of a sudden, starting in our incoming class in 2015, we saw a huge jump. So African American, now, for government data, you're not allowed to count biracial students who have one parent African American as African American. But when I wrote biracial, including biracial, that means that we're actually including students from Africa, which basically it's the students who present as Black. And so we went from about 2% in the incoming class to 12%. The next year it was 10%, this year it's also 10%. Hispanic students, we went from being about 5% to 20%. The next year was 22%, this year is back at 21%. So we saw these just really dramatic increases, and I will talk about how we got there. And this was, this is one of these things, so what are the kinds of things you do? I mean, unlike, Canadian university, where you largely recruit, most of your domestic students will come from your province. You'll have a few from other provinces, and then you'll also have a fraction of your students that are international students. And my understanding is that Simon Fraser in applied science is about 25% in international students and maybe about 17% for the institution. We typically run about 10 to 12% international students. For the rest of the students, they typically come from 40 different states from the US. And so we're really recruiting within the country from across the country, though I will say roughly 35 to 40% will be from California. So what are the kinds of things that you do when you want to recruit more students? So we run a program, we do a lot of different things. We run a program called FAST, stands for Future Achievers in Science and Technology. And we bring in students from all across the United States. We fly them in for a weekend. We have them attend some classes. We coach them on how to apply to college. Applying to college is so much more complicated and ridiculous in the United States than it is in Canada. I mean, Canada, as an undergraduate, you could go to Simon Fraser, you could go to UBC, you could go to UVic, you could go to, one of the four-year universities, and you get a really good education. You might, particularly if your parents are wealthy, you might apply to some colleges and universities in the United States. In the United States, it's like your grade 11 year, you are traveling. This is for middle class and upper class families. You're traveling to visit colleges all across the country, and you're going to apply to like 20 of them in the hope that you'll maybe get in, and you'll have this thing as a stretch schools, the one you probably won't get into. You'll have this thing like I've forgotten even the term, but anyway, it's your safe schools that you're sure to get into, and then you'll have a bunch in between. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, because in fact, you can go to University of Lethbridge and you'll get a great education. Go to the University of Alberta, University of Toronto, or you can go to, I'm going to make something up. I don't want to offend somebody, but I'm going to say UBC Okanagan. That probably, I'll only offend UBC. You can get a great education at any of these places. And you're going to be able to go on to a top PhD program or medical program if you want to. In the US, people feel like if you didn't get into one of the top universities, your life is over. It's bananas. But in any case, in order to attract some of these students, we fly in a cohort of roughly 40 students for a weekend. And in particular, we bring in students of color and women in order to try and increase the diversity. And so this particular year where we saw the shift, we had done 2 cohorts instead of 1. We had also made a real effort to understand why African American families will choose some universities and why Hispanic families will choose other ones, and try to address both of those. So African American families, it turns out, they want their kids to go to the best known place they got into. And Harvey Mudd College, when I went to Harvey Mudd College, most people didn't have a clue what or where it was. But every black student who gets into Harvey Mudd also got into, if they applied, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, whatever. Those are really well-known colleges. So we had to do something to raise our visibility. And so in 2011, I had gone to talk to Sheryl Sandberg, who's the CEO of Facebook, and I told her about what we had done in computer science, which she didn't know any department that had made the kind of progress we'd made. And I asked her for help. And the help I asked her for was, please talk about us because we need to be better known. We can't help other places change unless people know we exist. And we suddenly went from being a place that nobody ever heard of to, in the 12 months after I had that meeting with her, we had 60 publications in the media. We were in the New York Times, we were in the New Yorker, we were in Time Magazine, it was amazing. So that was one of the things that helped with the African American numbers going up. For Hispanic families, they want their kids to stay close to home. And so the problem is that most of the high schools in the greater Los Angeles area are awful. And so we had not been admitting any of the graduates of those high schools. And we made the decision that we would start admitting the top student from a local high school if they'd taken all of the most rigorous, ambitious courses in math and science that they had access to, and if they'd also shown grit, perseverance, all of those kinds of things. But all of a sudden, that meant that we had a much greater diversity of preparation in our incoming class. The third thing, and we did lots of other stuff as well, but the third major thing that changed was we had a brand new assistant professor, her name is Colin Lewis, who had joined our Department of Computer Science. And after we sent out the admissions acceptances to our students, she sent out an email message to all the faculty saying, how about if we reach out and contact by phone or by email every admitted student of color? Within 24 hours, a quarter of our faculty had signed up to do this. And in fact, more than a quarter were engaged. And that's the thing that probably, for me, has the greatest explanation for that jump. Now, we also increased our Native American Pacific Islander numbers, our international numbers, so they went down the next year. We have no idea why they went down, but I think it was the Chinese economy. And Asian Americans stayed stable, roughly 20 to 25%, and Caucasian has been steadily decreasing. And now the percentage of students who are Caucasian probably represent the percentage of citizens in the United States who are Caucasian. And I put here the numbers for both 2015 and 2016 in terms of the incoming class, and the numbers for 2017 are very similar, except that once again, for the second time in the history of the college, we're more than 50% female in the incoming class. So what about racial diversity in our faculty? Well, there's a big difference between the amount of time that students are at undergraduates at an institution and the amount of time our faculty are there. So at a place like SFU with a co-op program, it's probably mostly like 5 years or possibly 6 years. Harvey Mudd, we don't have a co-op program, so it's probably more like 4 years or 5 years. Our faculty typically stay for 35. And so that means that the changes are going to be different. So it's slower. We're seeing fairly steady progress, but I will say to you that every time that our dean of the faculty, which is our provost equivalent, stops paying attention just for a couple of months, we end up hiring all white men. It's just the most ridiculous thing. But it's almost as though, like when we're paying attention, we're training our search committees, we're really, like working hard on it. We'll be roughly, we could have, 2 people of color and 4 women. But as soon as we stop, the pendulum swings back. It's very interesting. The most important thing in all this is to educate your search committees, because what we know is if you want to recruit a diverse pool of candidates, diverse with respect to anything, you have to work way harder. You can't just post ads. Oops, back up. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what we actually did in order to significantly increase, because you can get lots of women in the door. I mean, when I was Dean of Science at UBC, well over 50% of our undergraduates were female. But they were not going into computer science and they were not going into physics. They were going into biology, chemistry, biochem, etc. So here's the hypothesis. If you make the learning environment engaging and supportive for everyone, and you build confidence and community among your underrepresented groups, and you also demystify the path to success, you will recruit and retain a highly diverse population. Now, I'm going to go through how you do these things, but let's just focus on the first one for a moment. If I'm teaching a math course or a physics class or a computer science class or any of these classes, philosophy class, that is highly rigorous, which is what our courses are like at Harvey Mudd, and I'm sure they are at Simon Fraser as well, I can start my class by saying, this is a really challenging class. This is where you find out whether you're really going to be a mathematician or not. Half of the students are not going to be taking the next class after this. Or I could start my class and I could say, this is a really challenging class, but every student who works hard and gets help is going to do just fine. What's really going to count is the level of effort, persistence, grit, and also being willing to reach out and get help from the professors, the tutors, whoever else is involved. Well, I'm really sorry to say it, but traditionally in science and engineering, the people teaching the class have been more likely to start out the way I did it the first time rather than the second time. And it's more than just how you frame expectations. It's also how you ensure that the actual experience in the classroom is supporting for everyone and interesting for everyone. I'll say more about that in a moment. A bit about confidence and community. If let's say women are 15% of your engineering science major, I'm making it up, it could be higher than that, or lower. Higher? Well, let's say even 20%. There's a really good chance, especially if you're taking your introductory classes in large classes of 300 or 250 or 100 students, that you won't get to know those other women in your class. And so even if you are a fifth of the people in the classroom, you feel very alone. And if you think about it at the graduate level, most graduate research groups have 5 or 6 PhD students in them. Okay, if 20% of the students are female, that means most graduate research groups are going to have 1. And it's very lonely. And so you have to be very intentional, and Leslie knows all about this and she's busy working on this. You have to be very intentional about creating opportunities to bring the members of the underrepresented groups together. So our Black students at Mudd, they call themselves BLAM. Yeah. You sort of have this image of someone being hit in the head and go BLAM, right? But anyway, Black Lives at Mudd. They have reserved a set of tables on Wednesdays of each week for all of the Black staff, faculty, and students just sit together and eat. And I mean, it's amazing how very simple things can actually help people develop more connections and a greater sense of belonging. Another great thing to do is take them to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing or many other kinds of conferences that are designed to provide people who are underrepresented in a discipline with role models that they can identify with. Okay, demystifying the path to success. Okay, here's the really weird thing. If you're not in the dominant group, you don't even know about the advice, the insights, and the opportunities you're missing out on because you're not, whatever, going to the pub to drink beer, playing golf on the golf course, you name it. And if you are in the dominant group, you don't even know that you're getting those advantages that other people don't. And so the only way to really level the playing field is to be really clear and give information to everyone about what you need to do to succeed. Okay. So, the very first place that you either can win students or lose students is in your intro class. Because especially for areas like computer science and engineering, many students in high school will not have a clue what those disciplines are really like. And even for math and physics and chemistry and biology, even though you take those courses in high school, you don't really see what they're like. So, especially for computer science, separate sections by prior experience. Because typically, the students who arrive at college, there's some like my son who started programming when he was 12. By the time he was 13, he was working his way through a first-year textbook in C++. And by the time he got to college, he could just ace the introductory computer science courses without really doing anything. And it's not fair to put that person beside someone like my daughter who resisted every possible effort I made to get her to learn to program. And we'd be going into that course and, there would be these kids in the class, sort of like my son, who just love computer science. And they're both answering all the questions and asking all the questions. And it makes all the other kids who don't have prior experience feel like they don't belong, there's no way they can succeed, etc. I already told you about the second one. We've found that it's incredibly important to encourage collaboration because, especially in computer science, for people who don't really know about computer science, they think it's all about these people sitting in their basement with their computer, having no friends, no social life. And of course, that's not what it's like to actually work as a software engineer today. It's all teamwork. But we often teach as though we expect our students to spend all their time sitting in the basement. Provide lots of support. Our goal is we make our courses incredibly challenging. And we provide an incredible amount of support. Because when you graduate, you're going to encounter lots of situations that are challenging and lots of situations where you doubt you can succeed. And so you want to give students the experience of being challenged, having self-doubt, and then being able to assemble the resources and learn how to learn the material and then move forward. So for our Intro CS class, this is the one without any prior experience. We provide one GRUTer, which stands for Grader Tutor. It's an undergraduate student, per 8 students in the class. Now, one of the things about this is that if you separate by prior experience, often you then, at some point, you're going to put them back together. And you have this terrible thing that, okay, your first class was really great, but then the ones who had more experience are going to do so much better in the second course in the sequence. And so you have to figure out what you do with the extra time you have for the students with more experience. And basically, our approach has been, let's teach them a bunch of really interesting, exciting stuff that has nothing to do with the material in the next 2 courses. It'll benefit them eventually. It'll keep them engaged, but it doesn't privilege them. One of the most important things we learned is never talk about your introductory course as learning to program in X. We talk about it as creative problem solving for problems in science and engineering using computational approaches with Python, but we make that part less important. And so it's all about being part of a creative group that's working on something that's going to be super fun. And eliminate macho behavior. Okay, I'm going to pick on Eugene. Come on up here. I've known him for a long time. Probably longer than most of you guys have known him for. So Eugene is in my class, and he is like my son. He's been programmed for a very young age. And he is, so even though we separate by prior experience, we still have difference of experience because, we only have 3 layers of prior experience, and there's a continuum. So Eugene is in my class, and he is asking a lot of questions and answering a lot of questions. And so I have a private one-on-one meeting with Eugene. And I say, Eugene, I love having you in my class. You're one of the most passionate and enthusiastic students I've ever worked with.
Why, thank you.
And then I say, your level of enthusiasm and how much you know is a little bit intimidating to other students in the class. So, I have office hours 3 times a week from 1 to 3 on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. why don't you come by at an office hour and we'll have the conversation in my office hours instead of in the class. Is that okay?
That'd be really cool.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, round of applause for your great Dean of Applied Science. It works because for the most part, the people who are asking the questions and answering them, it's not that they're trying to be intimidating. It's that they've been trying to learn computer science, and most of their teachers in high school and middle school know way less than they do. And all of a sudden they get into this and they have a professor who actually loves computer science and knows computer science, and they just respond to it by going, woof. Anyway, it works. Now, you might say, what if I have 200 students in my class? Then you do it in your tutorials. You have TAs doing it. And the single most important thing, one great class does not a major make. So you encourage them just to take the next course. You make sure the next course is just as engaging and supportive. You try to make sure, and with co-op programs this is a great way to do it, that they have opportunities to use what they have learned. So since we don't have co-op programs for the most part in the US, we have worked with large tech companies to offer quote unquote early internship programs where they will take students who've just finished the first year or their second year in college. And so Facebook calls it Facebook University, Google calls it their pre-internship program, Microsoft calls it their early internship program. I mean, they have a variety of names for them. But we know that if they get a chance to actually use what they've been learning and see that it is useful for something, they're more likely to choose the major. Okay, next steps. Ditto for the next courses. I already told you about this one. We send our students to conferences like, so I already mentioned the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing. There's the TAPIA conference, which is for people of color and people with disabilities in computer science. There's NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers. There's SPLS and SACNAS, which is for Hispanic students. And even though we can't send all of our students to these conferences, we know that if we send a dozen and they have a wonderful experience, the buzz they bring back will be inspirational to the entire community. And then building community, a lot of this is, we're very lucky that we have a lot of women faculty members, so I think that is very helpful for our female students. But we don't have a lot of Black faculty. We have 4 out of 90-something. So one of the things I make sure is that whenever we're having a speaker series, particularly a leadership one, I will try to make sure I have women, I have Black people, I have Hispanic people, because I need them to see that there are people who look like them who succeed. Okay, making computer science available to all majors. Well, very deliberately, by framing computer science as something you could use to solve problems in science and engineering, and making it non-intimidating and making it legitimately fun, that meant that virtually every student who comes to Mudd liked it. Well, what happened, so at the Clermont colleges, I told you about the 5 undergraduate colleges, they can all take courses at each other's campuses. Now, we've never had a super popular Mudd course because, one, the meme around the Clermont College is the Mudd students are smarter than any of the other students. That's not particularly true, but number 2 is that the Mudd courses are way harder and much more work than the courses at the other colleges. That probably is true. And number 3 is we don't like to give A's. That's definitely true. So why would you take a course at Mudd, given that situation? Well, this introductory computer science course, so remember we have 825 students. We have 200 and some entering course. We have 600 students taking that course every year. So most of them are coming from the other colleges. And I have students from the other colleges walk up to me and say, we just want to thank you for CS5 Gold. Thank you for making this course possible. We have And if you look at the gender distribution of the students from the other colleges, it's 50% female. So it's not just on our campus that we made it safe and fun. We now have students from all of the other colleges except Pomona majoring in computer science at Mudd. Pomona has its own CS department. They don't allow you to major at a different college other than them. So it worked. But what we've also realized is that when you design courses, typically we have designed our CS courses for people who are going to major in computer science. But today, every single person needs a computer science course. And they typically are going to need more than one course. But the sequence that you do for a computer science major probably isn't the most efficient way of giving content to students who are not going to major in computer science. And so we have been designing second courses for non-CS majors. We will have one on data science, which is you only have to have taken the Intro CS class to take it. And it is restricted to non-CS majors. And we have students from all of the 5 colleges taking it. Similarly, we've been doing one in software engineering for engineering majors. We found that it's incredibly helpful in terms of attracting women to majors, is offering joint majors that combine particularly psychology and computer science, biology and computer science. And so at Mudd we have, we don't have a psychology joint major because we don't have a psychology major, but we have CS, CS Math, and CS Math Bio as combined majors. And what we see is the only CS is roughly 50% female. The CS Math Bio is about 2/3 female. And the CS Math is a little bit less than 40% female. So it's been very interesting just how it plays out. Northeastern has, I believe, 28 different joint majors with computer science. They have theater, they have, I mean, if you name it, they have it. It's amazing, fine arts. And then the other thing is that one of the things that is becoming very clear, particularly in the US, and I don't think it's quite as bad in Canada yet, we're seeing a large proportion of our PhDs going to industry instead of going to academia. And we're seeing academic computer sciences stolen by industry, where one, they're being given the opportunity to do basic research and publish in the open literature, and two, they're being paid 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times as much. And so one of the things I think we're going to have to deal with in the longer term is to be able to take people who are getting a PhD in neuroscience or biology or psychology and help them learn enough computer science to be able to teach introductory computer science. Because I don't honestly see how we will deal with the demand if we don't do something like that. Okay. The tech workplace culture. Well, it won't surprise you that, what are you doing here? Sorry, that's a physicist from UBC. Yeah, sure that was going to work, Dennis. My theory is exactly the same kinds of things we have done in the educational environment will also work in the tech workplace. And so I guess it's about 3.5 years ago now, I was invited to give a talk at a conference called HR 50. And the director of the president's office, she said, why would you do that? I mean, and I said, because if you really think about what's going on in industry, the HR people have a lot of impact on what happens in the culture. So anyway, I gave this talk and I put up this hypothesis, which is basically the same one as I just told you about the education environment. And one of the things that I talked about is how we advertise jobs. So there's lots of research that says if we advertise a job and it has sort of 8 technical skills that you might want the candidate to have, if women have 6, they probably won't apply. And if men have 3, they'll apply. I mean, it's just bananas. So what do you want to do? So what we've suggested is you start out your job ad by saying, we're seeking people who are highly creative and have excellent people skills, teamwork skills, and communication skills. And at least a few of the following technical areas, experience in the following technical areas would be helpful. Now, why does that matter? Most women, they're pretty confident about their creativity, their communication skills, their people skills, their teamwork skills. And if you put that in the ad, you are signaling that you're a company that actually values those things. So I said you should change your ads, you should change the interview process. So how many people here have interviewed for a tech job someplace? Okay, I've got quite a few of you. So typical interview at a Google or a Microsoft or even Facebook will be, you know, you're gonna meet, let's say, 8 to 12 different people for a half hour. Most of them are gonna be men, probably all of them are gonna be men. They're not gonna even say, welcome to Google, or nice to have you here, even maybe even hello. They will probably say, show me how you would code this data structure on the whiteboard. And then as you start to do the coding, they will be arguing with you. Well, why did you do that? And don't you think you should do this? And it's obnoxious. And most women who go through that experience, they may just shut down altogether because you just don't want to be treated that way. But you know, I happen to be somebody who loves to argue, and I would do just fine in that kind of environment. But most women, they're going to say, I don't want a job in this country, and so in this company. So Google has studied for 10 years the effect of that type of interview process. And they have a whole bunch of like 30 PhDs in statistics analyzing it. What does it show? It shows that it overpredicts for success for men. In other words, the men who do well in the interviews don't do nearly as well as you would think in the actual job. And it underpredicts for women. Don't you think they would change the interview process? Nope, they're still doing it. So, what's that?
I could understand if they didn't have the data, so
They have the data, 10 years of data. It's just like, it's unbelievable. So you can learn, I mean, so here's a much more friendly way of assessing whether somebody understands something like an object-oriented programming language. Tell us how you would explain Java or any other object-oriented programming language to a 5-year-old. Now, that's a great question, because it really, you have to understand the concepts much better to have a hope at explaining it to a 5-year-old. And it's really causing people to get away from the jargon and really think about what the underlying ideas are. So in any case, after I had given this talk, a woman came up to me and introduced herself. Her name is Ellen Shook. She's the Chief HR Officer for Accenture. And she said, you've given me some really good ideas. Now, what I didn't know was that was like her 3rd day in that role. Okay? And she said, we hire 15,000 engineers, software engineers each year in India. We're coming in at 30% female, which is actually very high. I'd like to get us to 45%, and you gave me some real ideas. 4 months later, I see her at a different conference. She comes up to me and she says, Maria, you won't believe this. We changed the ads, we changed the interview process, and we started interviewing at women-only engineering schools, of which there are actually quite a few in India for cultural reasons, as well as co-ed schools. We came in at 42% female. That's all they changed. I mean, the message is you don't have to change a ton. You just have to adjust what you're doing to make yourself a place that is attractive to women. Now, of course, that's not enough, because if you get them in the door, but your workplace culture is really hostile, they're not going to stay. So they've also, a year later, so my answer to Ellen was, you're right, you owe me. you're joining the Harvey Mudd College board. Okay, it costs money to be on the Harvey Mudd College board, like $50K American a year. She joined. A year later, she said to me, well, we actually managed to come in at 42% for all of our technical recruiting around the world. Similar kind of approaches. They aim for gender parity by 2025, but they're not doing it just at recruiting. They have put in place a number of programs to try to make sure that women are getting access to career development opportunities. They have put in programs for people who adopt or have a baby in their family, that you're not going to travel for the first 12 months, because consulting, one of the things about consulting jobs is that you travel a great deal. Their most recent promotion to some level, I think partner in the company, 30% of the people who were promoted were female. It's way above anything they've ever seen. And the thing I would say is that it does take effort and persistence to make progress, but it doesn't particularly take a lot of resources. And so I would love to answer questions. And I believe Danielle has a mic.
Yes, I think I do. Yeah, I have a mic. We're recording this, so it's a live webcast. So if you have a question, please put your hand up and I'll bring the mic to you.
I also have a mic on this side. Oh, come on. There we go.
Yes.
First, thank you for doing this. My question is, are you aware that Uber has made a sizable donation to Girls Who Code? And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a great question. So actually, there's a great deal of controversy right now whether or not organizations that are trying to attract more women into tech jobs should be accepting contributions from Uber. So for example, the Anita Borg Institute, which is the organization that runs the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, actually returned their donations and said that they wouldn't accept further donations from Uber until they basically fixed up their act. And I got phone calls from two very senior women at Uber who were devastated by that decision, because they felt like we're working incredibly hard to try and make this a good place, a better place for women in tech, and they're taking away the support. And I was on the board of ABI for 14 years and had a lot of conversations with them over this decision. What I will say about Uber is an Uber-sized example, in the sense that, Travis himself is sort of an outsized personality, and I think, his number one thing that he has been focused on with Uber is to get it to grow as fast as possible. And so I actually met with 4 people from Uber, sometime after the Susan Fowler memo happened, and sometime before Travis actually stepped down as CEO. And they were talking to me about the situation, and they pointed out that Uber had gone from 2,500 employees to 12,500. And during that period of time, they had no HR manager. They had no management training. They had no safety valves. They had nothing in place to prevent the kinds of bad things that happen. Now, because I have women that I mentor who work at Uber, I know there are women who are having a great experience. I also know there are women who are having horrendous experiences. And so I'd say the thing about Uber in general is, I do blame Travis for this. I think it was, but I blame the board equally. And it's just completely irresponsible to be growing at that pace without having some reasonable HR function in place. And I mean, so people who were sexually harassed in various kinds of ways would complain to an HR manager, but the complaints would go nowhere because there was nobody really leading HR, and so there was nobody setting best practices for HR. I mean, it was just completely insane. Okay, that's my first comment on Uber. My second comment is, and I hate to say this, but I think that Uber is not that different from many other tech companies, large and small, in that my experience has been that you can have people in leadership roles who actually do care about diversity and inclusion. But if the company has had a culture of, well, so let's use Microsoft because that's a company I know really well. They had a culture where the way you sort of showed that you had the chops to be successful was you were capable of having a really intense argument with Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer or with some other high-level person. And so if you weren't comfortable doing that, and so, my sense was for your first 5 years or so at Microsoft, actually the climate was very positive, very supportive. But then as you got into more politically charged levels, the way that people talked to you was just abusive. I don't know any other word to say it. And that, again, if you complained about behavior that you thought was bullying or completely inappropriate from somebody who was seen as a high performer, action was not going to be taken. And, we have seen recently all of the stories that have come out of VCs where basically venture capitalists have female founders of companies trying to get them to invest in their company, and essentially the male venture capitalists, not all of them, but quite a few of them, are hitting on them. And it's not even seen as inappropriate. Now, if I think back 35 years, I was sort of seen as being okay for faculty members to date a student, even a student in their class. Maybe it's longer than 35 years, but it's not. I mean, it certainly, it happened a fair bit, and it's only in more recent years that academia has said, no, there's a power differential. That is totally inappropriate. And I think that kind of dialogue is finally starting to hit the entrepreneurship communities and the tech community, but we have a long way to go still.
Hi, I'll just ask about, the Google Manifesto. I just found when all that came out this summer, I don't know, I'm not even in IT, I'm just in science. And oh man, that just dug up so many things. What kind of comments do you have on that? Because then it seems
So this
Google
is
as well, it's everything.
James Damore, who was a level 5 software engineer, I believe. Maybe he's level 7. Anyway, a reasonably high-level software engineer at Google. And he wrote a manifesto where that was published to the entire company, where basically he said, all of this diversity and affirmative action, inclusion stuff that's going on is totally misguided because it's highly probable that the reason there are so few women is because women just biologically aren't suited for being software engineers, whatever. And Google fired him like 2 days later. And this became a whole thing. And I cannot tell you how many interviews I have done with the media on this particular topic. And so the first thing I would say is there's been so much research on genetic differences between girls and boys and men and women that show that there's very little difference that you can actually attribute to just, the genetic differences. That there might be some very minimal ones, but the overlap is so huge that blaming the fact that you're female for the reason that you might not feel comfortable working in a tech workplace is just total BS. And particularly when we have all of this evidence of the kinds of things that go on in the tech workplace that are very dismissive of women in so many ways. And that, you know, I would say that if you have a career in computer science, in industry, you have to be pretty tough. I mean, you have to sort of put up with, you know, people making snide remarks like, oh, let me do that part of the problem for you. It's really too technical for you. Or, you're not serious that you really know something about this, are you? Because, I mean, how could somebody like you know about this thing? I mean, it's just, there's so much going on that is sending the signal that you're not likely to be as good, you're not likely to work as hard, you're not likely to stay in the job because you'll have children and go, you know, stay home. I mean, just, and then, you know, like basically given all of this evidence that shows that women are at a huge disadvantage, and now you want to blame it given all the science that's being done on genetic differences. And, you know, I think the only thing that was good about that was it got a lot of people talking, exactly. We have...
Hello? Oh, hi Maria. I was recently at your talk about mentorship in downtown Vancouver, so it's really great to hear you speak again. My question is, do you have any stories or examples about when you met resistance or kickback to some diversity and inclusion efforts and how you sort of dealt with that?
So, I mean, I certainly have been in a variety of, I mean, there's been a variety of times in my life where we had this dialogue about, so for example, when I was applying, when UBC was nominating me for the chair that Leslie now holds, so the universities were asked to, you know, what kind of resources they were going to devote to the initiative if they got the chair. And UBC said that it would add a faculty member to computer science where that person would be selected to be somebody who was particularly experienced in mentoring women in computer science. And the department had a 2-hour discussion arguing whether they would accept that position. And the people who were against accepting it were saying, I think it's wrong to try and encourage someone to be interested in a discipline. They should like it just for its own sake. And if they don't, then we're not doing them a favor by encouraging them to do something. And the people who are arguing the other side were saying, well, there's a lot of societal things about how various disciplines are portrayed that may influence somebody to think they wouldn't be interested, where in fact they would be very interested if they really had a chance to try it. And eventually I had to leave the department discussion, and it wasn't an ugly discussion, but it was an intense discussion. And I had to leave the discussion before they did the vote. And later I found out what the vote was. It was N to 1, where N was like on the order of 50. And the person who voted against it, a faculty member, a very senior faculty member, and later that day he came up to me and said, Maria, I was the person who voted against it. But I want you to know that since the department passed this, I'm going to support this with all of my heart. And I think it was really good that we had that long dialogue, because I think if it had just been sort of a top-down thing, without the department deciding whether they wanted to do it or not, there would have been much more resistance. And the person we ended up hiring was Ann Condon, who, you know, was the second person. She's 2.0. She's 4.0. And you know they get better every time. Every release is better. And she then became the head of the department. You know, she ended up just being a phenomenal hire for UBC. So I've run into this, I think, many times where people are saying, you know, merit should be enough. We should just think about merit. Just hire the best person. And what I will say is, well, it's really hard to hire the best person if you have a bunch of people who are discouraged about actually being a candidate. I think it's great to, and also, what is your definition of best? And I guess one of the things I think about is when I'm hiring a faculty member, I want somebody who will bring a rich collection of passions and strengths. So yes, I want somebody who's going to be an outstanding researcher, who is going to be, love to discover new things and be a wonderful mentor to graduate students. But I also want somebody who's going to be a role model and a fantastic undergraduate teacher. I want somebody who's going to collaborate with people across a range of different areas in the department so that we can build a department that really comes together rather than one that is siloed. I would like them to be able to collaborate with people, whether it's in teaching or research or outreach or any of those things, with people in different departments. Because I think when you create a community, a learning environment community, what you really want is you want a community that supports each other, that challenges each other to be better, that helps each other to be better. So, when someone says it's just a meritocracy, well, let's at least talk about what kind of merit we're talking about. Because often we're only looking at one axis, like, okay, what's their citation index? Or, how many research grants have they brought in? Or how many PhD students do they have that are teaching at top departments elsewhere? We're very seldom looking at what will they actually bring to the department if they join us? How will they make us a better place? How will they empower everyone in the environment to do better?
And I'm going to close this off now. Let's thank Maria again. She gave a lovely talk. And as part of that thank you, I want to give her this. Sorry for all the
It's a talking stick.
Exactly.
I have never had a talking stick. I have wanted a talking stick. Thank you very much.
Well, I was going to say now you can keep talking. No. Seriously, though, this is from Jim Yelton, the Coast Salish Nation.
That's
and
beautiful.
the eagle is to symbolize strength and leadership. And I think that is very, very fitting. Yes. And so let's thank her one more time.
Oh, really? I can't imagine anything better you could have given me.
We're gonna close up and have a reception in a moment, and you'll have a chance maybe to ask a few more questions because I saw some in the audience. But before we go, I really want to thank and recognize the Colloquium sponsors. So that obviously includes the SFU President's Office, the Department of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, the Vice President of Research's Office, and SFU's Key Big Data Initiative, NSERC, Tableau, the Faculty of Applied Sciences, the School of Computing Science, and a little self-plug, but my program also sponsored this. So West also got in.
Oh, West. I thought you were going to say computer engineering.
No, don't I wish. I have no budget. Anyway, that's okay. That's part of the Take Over the World plan, right, Pinky? Anyway, thank you all for coming out to join us tonight. I really hope you'll enjoy and join us for the rest of the talks. The next one is going to be by Sherry Graydon. She's of Catalyst and Informed Opinions, and that's going to be next Thursday, September 21st, here at 5:30. If you've never seen Sherry talk or give a workshop, she's all about getting women to be upfront and in the media, op-eds, interviews. She's a powerhouse. It's hard to follow Maria, but if anyone can do it, I think Sherry might pull it off. So I really hope to see you all soon. Please come join us for the reception. Thank you so much.